Hi everyone, I'm Zangmo, one of the Living is Dying presentation team, and today is session 26 of the Living is Dying program. So wonderful we are doing this together. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia or wherever you're practicing from. We acknowledge their connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Today we'll be going through the chapter Questions about Caring for the Dying and the Dead, and also advice for those suffering unbearable pain. This is quite a big section where Rinpoche has very kindly given guidance on many questions that were offered. To complement this, we have three guest speakers. Kirsten Isbel, whom you have heard from before. She's a palliative care nurse with Chittamani Hospice and an Undro student. Ani Lhagsam, who you've also met before. Ani lives at Chenrezig Institute on the Queensland Sunshine Coast and is involved with Chittamani and Karuna Hospice. Her nursing experience also includes mental health and drug and alcohol. And today we welcome Judy Arpana. She's joining us for the first time. Welcome, Judy. I know many of you know her, but I'll read her full bio because we haven't had the pleasure of having you on with us yet. So Judy has been a counsellor for more than 30 years, specialising in grief and loss. She has extensive experience in developing and delivering a range of seminars and training workshops for staff and volunteers in hospitals, community settings, aged care facilities and hospices throughout Australia and Europe. She initiated and coordinated a branch of the AIDS Council of New South Wales in Lismore and was the spiritual care educator for the Rigpa Spiritual Care Program. Judy studied Jungian therapy with Patrick Jansen and trained with Mal and Di McKissick and Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She studied Buddhism for more than 35 years. Judy's inspired to offer practical ways to benefit and support those facing life-threatening illness or death, their families and caregivers. In her work, she brings together Buddhist wisdom and insights to improve end-of-life care, exploring universal spiritual principles that resonate with people of any faith or those that don't have a particular faith. So welcome to all of you. And Annie Shempen is our tech support as well. So some of the sections of the book I'll just be reading, and then other parts I'll take the book down and we'll hear from the guest speakers. Please jot down any questions you have in the chat because we'll make time at the end so we can go through those together. So let's go to Rinpoche's book. Getting all my papers in order. Questions about caring for the dying and the dead. Hold on, and in the pause, Buddha have mercy. Sheo, the Japanese death poem. What is the most skillful way of dealing with an old person who isn't a Dharma practitioner and expresses a wish to die on a daily basis? Rinpoche answers, it's probably better not to contradict or argue with them. Try to chant or sing Om Mani Padme Hum whenever you can, but casually, in the same way you would hum or whistle a tune. Don't sing directly at the old person. Make it look as though they overhear you by accident. In the long run, it really doesn't matter whether your singing annoys them or not. The fact that they have heard the sound of mantra will mean they have made a connection with the Dharma, and ultimately that connection will help. If they like your singing, that's also good. Either way, both reactions of liking and not liking are symptoms of having made a connection. Tell the person that in their situation, longing for death is completely understandable, but also suggest that as they long for death, they may also make strong aspiration to be reborn with the ability to help others, people, animals, the natural environment, and so on. What should I say to a Christian who believes they are bad and will end up in hell? You should suggest that they pray to their God and ask for forgiveness. You could also chant Om Mani Padme Hum casually, as we talked about above. And also you may remember Ani Lhagsam did a session, it was session 20 in the resources, where she included the 4 opponent powers, the 4 R's, which were refuge, regret, resolve, and remedy. I think Anila also listed sort of a less Buddhist way of presenting that as well, but that was in session 20. So please have a look back if this is an area that you want to touch up on. What should I do if a dying person starts having frightening visions of demons and so on? Tell them that their mind is playing tricks on them. Then chant Om Mani Padme Hum and other Dharanis. I'm just going to take that down so Judy can speak to that.
Yes, when I read this, it reminded me that the Bardo teachings also apply to our daily lives, so that I really am encouraged by that, because when we're having strong emotions like anger or fear or whatever, if we can just remember that it is a projection of our own mind, we're immediately released from that. We're no longer believing in the story of what we've got going on in our minds. So I really feel very inspired by the Bardo teachings in applying it in our daily life.
Yeah. Thanks, Judy. What should I do if the dying person won't acknowledge what is happening and instead wants to engage in small talk? You should engage in small talk, Rinpoche says. By doing so, you may be able to win the dying person's heart, which would give you the opportunity to insert some useful information about bodhicitta into the conversation. You may also be able to introduce them to Om Mani Padme Hum. What should I do if the dying person has a very strong will to live and won't let go at the moment of death? No matter how strong a person's will to live, nothing can avert death. Longing to live or a strong will to live is a sign that the person has not accepted death, which could intensify their suffering. On the other hand, if causes and conditions have conspired to force a person close to death even though their life force is intact and undamaged, a strong will to live could help bring them back to life. In other words, it is possible that their life force has not been damaged. This is why it's always good to perform strengthening and life-lengthening rituals that in the right circumstances have the power to bring a person back to life. If you are not a Vajrayana practitioner, you could read a sutra out loud, such as the Sutra of Boundless Life and Wisdom. You can find that at the Lotsawa House website. Tantrikas who have received the relevant empowerments could chant the mantra of the 3 long-life deities, or perform an Amitayas or Aryatara ritual like the Chima Padmanintik. If you have received the Chima Padmanintik empowerment, follow the text of the practice that your Vajrayana Guru has given you. Doing good deeds in the name of the dying person also helps. You could practice life release, for example, Jamyam Khensi Wangpo's text, Increasing Life and Prosperity, a method for freeing lives, which appears on page 203 And we'll actually be doing this together as a group later in the program, towards the end. You could vow to be vegetarian, ideally for the rest of your life, but at least for a set period of time, like a day or a week, a month or a year. You could commission, buy or construct statues or paintings of Buddha Amitayus and Aryatara. You could even build a temple. The next question. How can I support a dying person who is in shock because death is happening unexpectedly and very quickly? If the dying person is Buddhist, remind them of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, and read all the Bardo instructions out loud to them, especially if they are Tantrikas. If they are not Buddhist, just be loving and caring and give them your full attention. You will have plenty of time to read the Bardo instructions to them after they die, which is when you could also make merit by doing good deeds in their name. I'm going to take this down so we can hear from Kirsten.
Yes, so we have quite a few people who may have been newly diagnosed with a terminal illness, and they are at the very late stage of their disease. So of course that varies. And my experience, if it is a shock, it's often good when I go in and see someone, to just listen to their story first, listen to where they are at, how they are feeling about the diagnosis, how they're feeling about dying, and then get a feel for how the family is coping, how everyone is kind of dealing with that situation. Mm-hmm. And after I get kind of a bigger picture, then I can put things into place, like asking for enduring power of attorney, whether they have made a will, what their wishes are like, where they would like to die, that sort of thing. So it really is, it is quite personal, and it's very different for each family and each person that just had a diagnosis. And a lot of the time there's a lot of emotions, of course. So I find when we go in the first time, we just have a general conversation, and it's more about them talking to me and just telling me how things are for them. And then often the second time we go in, then the questions come about what is going to happen, how things are going to happen, what do you offer, that sort of thing. So it's really, with, you know, end of life things, it's always a process, and you kind of have to go with what the person needs at the time, and sometimes overloading them and going into all of the details of what's going to happen at the end is probably not really helpful. So, and because that will come in time, but you know, obviously sometimes we do go in and the person is already dying, and then it's either sort of finding out where the person is at and how they are feeling about dying as well. So often I find that the dying person often knows that they are dying, so it's not really new to them, because they do have a sense that things are changing, that their body is changing. So then often it helps to just ask, what do you think is happening? And often they will say, I think I'm dying. And then I will say, I think you are too. So it's kind of that confirmation that sometimes you have to give. And I just wanted to tell a story as well of someone I had handover in the morning that to admit a gentleman, I think he was in his 80s, and it was going to be quite a normal admission. And I came into the house, and the daughter, she was quite distressed, and she said, I don't know, something has changed and I'm not quite sure. He's not well. He's not really responding to me. So he was in a recliner, very peaceful, didn't appear in pain, but he wasn't really responding anymore. So we had to kind of deal with that situation right there and then. And I did tell the daughter that this is what's happening. Your dad is unfortunately dying. And she was distressed. She was asking, should we go to hospital? What should we do? And I said, I think what we're going to do is just sit here and allow that to happen, because I could see that it was the very last minutes, half an hour that of his life. So that's what we did. And I just explained to her what's happening, and she was able to say goodbye and just, say what she wanted to say, but just reassured her that everything is okay. And, it's not ideal to die in a recliner, but at that point it didn't really matter anymore. So you have to adjust to the situation. Even if someone has a car accident and you're coming to the scene, I think the best way is to just be there, be as calm as you can, and hold their hand, or, however it works, and just make sure that you let them know that you are there. And it ended up being a very peaceful passing, and it was okay. And it actually went very quickly. So yeah, I think being kind and compassionate, and really not doing too much sometimes, less is much more sometimes, and not going into all of the details of what's going to happen. So it really depends on the situation, but I think that's how you can support someone who's dying when it's happening quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks for sharing those examples too. Next question to Rinpoche. Do you think that having a religious belief about what happens after death brings a dying person comfort or fear? And he responds, it depends on the nature of the religious belief. Hearing about the ground of liberation on page 51 is extremely encouraging for a dying Buddhist, because it reminds us that the moment of death is our big chance to wake up and be liberated. Should a dying Catholic be encouraged to pray to the Virgin Mary? A sublime and holy being is usually a reflection of your own goodness, and the desire to pray to a holy being is a form of surrender and humility. When we pray, we put our trust in someone or something that is more divine and sublime than we are. This kind of trust is a very good human quality, but not all human beings can trust in this way. When we pray, our genuine humility, devotion and belief in the sublime is reflected back to us in the form of the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas and holy beings, beings like the Virgin Mary. For Catholics, Mary expresses serenity and gentle compassion, both of which are very good qualities to have in your mind as you die. So I would never suggest that to pray to the Virgin Mary is anything other than a very good idea. And Ani Lhagsam, I know you wanted to respond to this.
So for the last 18 months, I've been visiting a terminally ill Catholic woman. She was a nun for part of her life, so for about 10 years until circumstances changed. So her spiritual path has been very important in her life. Often she's too sick to go to Mass on Sundays, but she's part of a group that says the Rosary on Saturdays, and she's sometimes Zooms into her local church, and one of her friends who goes to Mass will bring the consecrated substance back for her. And she has great comfort from this, being able to take part in what she's familiar with. She's devoted a significant part of her life to her spiritual practice, and she finds it very comforting that she's still able to do, even when she's quite ill, she's still able to take part in that spiritual practice. And I have sometimes suggested to other Catholics that they try following Mass. It's online every day, so apparently on some website, and they can follow along. And some of them find it very, very comforting. And I think it would be the same for all spiritual practitioners, if you're familiar with a particular practice, to be able to continue with that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And wonderful that someone would bring the Eucharist. That's really good. Fantastic. I didn't know that was available.
Well, it's one of her friends that brings it, so yeah.
It's good. It's difficult to know when a dying Buddhist practitioner needs to be reminded of their practice, or whether silence would be better. Sometimes I feel shy about doing anything because I don't want to disturb or distract the dying person. Do you have any advice? Yes, it is difficult. Generally, though, what you say doesn't matter nearly as much as your motivation. So try to arouse a good and pure motivation. Then do your best to offer encouragement and instruction. And try to be sensitive. It is best not to annoy someone while they are dying. Carers who are empathetic and have a good intuition will be able to read the dying person's responses and adjust what they do accordingly. But even if the dying person gets annoyed or doesn't want to hear or accept that they are dying, you shouldn't pussyfoot around. This isn't the time to worry about political correctness. If you know without a shadow of a doubt that the person is dying, you should tell them. However annoyed they get, your advice about what they should do as they die and in the bardos will help them more than anything they have ever heard before. But it takes courage to deliver this kind of information, which is why your pure motivation, body language, demeanour, and even the tone of your voice are so important. It will all help. And Judy's going to speak to this.
Okay, when I looked at it again, I thought Rinpoche has given such wonderful advice for this, and we can all have doubts about what's happening when somebody is dying. And for me, I always just remember my motivation, and to just, if when in doubt, rather than jump in and say something, to remember my motivation and just to settle back into my heart and mind and quieten everything down, and then trust that if words come out, they'll be the right words, that we don't actually have to go up into our busy brain and try to think of something to say, that if we're centered, we're with the person and settled, whatever comes out of our mouth will be the right thing. It's and most people are quite comforted to be reassured that they are dying. Often it's the family that is not so sure, but in my experience, the dying person usually knows when they're dying, and if they're in doubt, to reassure them that yes, they are dying.
Okay, thanks, Judy.
Okay.
The next question. How do I deal with my own ambiguous feelings? Grief, animosity, sadness, desire for material gain from a loved one, and emotional stress, intense trauma, as I try to help a dying person through my practice. This is why tuning into your motivation, tuning into your motivation is so important. You may not feel clear about anything else, but if you are motivated by love, compassion, and especially bodhicitta, however shallow it may feel, whatever you do will help. If you're a Buddhist, I suggest you contemplate the 4 immeasurable thoughts: love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. You could even recite them to yourself as a reminder. The next question. I have seen 3 people die, and in each case the moment of death was very distressing. I saw no surrender, just a flailing body, fear and resistance. The doctor told me that even though the process of the body shutting down looks distressing, the minds of the dying don't register it. I didn't believe him. And Rinpoche responds, that is what the dissolution of the elements looks like. If you notice this happening as someone is dying, seize the opportunity to read the instructions on page 128 out loud, and they're the Bardo instructions for when someone initially dies. So I think both Judy and Kirsten are going to speak to this. Not sure who's going first.
No. Judy, would you like to go first?
Okay, hold on. Okay. Sorry, I didn't write down the answer to this one. I thought I was all prepared, but I wasn't. I think that it's very difficult to know what the person is going through, and death can look quite messy and a little bit like birth. We're not, we have sort of romantic notions about it, but it is the body closing down, so it doesn't look very elegant, and sometimes it doesn't look very peaceful. But my sense is that the person, because it is such an inner process, that the person is no longer relating to the body at all. They've gone deeply inwards, and the body just dissolving and closing down can look like it's very painful. But my sense is at that stage, at the very end, the person is not experiencing a lot of distress. It may appear on the outside to be that way, but my sense is that the person is deeply inside and no longer relating to the body.
Thank you.
Yes, I definitely agree with Judy. She said it very well. From our point of view, from a medical point of view, the body is shutting down, and there's an electrolyte imbalance. There's a toxin buildup in the body, which agitates the body and agitates the brain as well. And this is really just on a physical level, but there's also the dissolution of the elements. And, it's the same for me when I do see people who have terminal restlessness. So that's what we would call it. It's first off, it is manageable. So I'm very sorry for that person that she has, or he or she has experienced 3 people who have gone through that, and I'm sure it's not very nice to see that. Sorry. also when palliative care is done correctly, I think most of the time terminal restlessness can be managed with medication. Of course, you don't want to over medicate, which we never do, but it can be managed, and I think it does. It can cause some post-traumatic stress for the family members, so you always have to kind of keep that in mind as well as a nurse or as a doctor. But yes, I don't think that a person is very much aware anymore right at the end of their life. There is definitely a withdrawing happening, and the person is not rousable anymore. So they are already unconscious as well, even though it might look like they're agitated, they're actually not rousable. So I agree. I don't think that they are in distress, but of course we don't know, 100%. And it can be managed. So I guess that was really my main point that I wanted to make, and that the family members are always being included in all of that and included in the process and being educated around that, because I think education is so important to actually explain what's happening to that person, and then it makes it a little bit more understandable. But yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you. The process of dying isn't always calm, romantic and peaceful. As a caregiver, I am sometimes frightened and, to my shame, disgusted because weak bodies excrete, smell and so on. Do you have any advice about how to cope? Always encourage yourself. You are doing perhaps the greatest service one human being can do for another. Far too many people are abandoned at death because so few of us are willing to take responsibility for caring for the dying. And there is nothing more painful or terrifying to a human being than the process of dying. If you are a Buddhist, pray to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and ask them to give you strength, the wisdom and the compassion to make everything you do turn out to be exactly what the dying person needs and longs for. Also pray that somehow your help will result in the seed of bodhicitta being sown in their minds. But don't try to do too much too quickly. To willingly offer to care for the dying is an incredibly brave thing to do, but it will take time for you to get used to everything that job entails. Take it step by step, starting with very small steps. Gradually you will gain more and more experience, and if your motivation is rooted in love, compassion and bodhicitta, whatever you do will definitely help. Next question. How can I help a dying person who is strongly medicated on morphine, for example? Read the Bardo instructions in this book, especially after the person is dead. Morphine only really affects the body. So once the body is dead, it will have far less effect on their mind. My job is to care for the dying. Often relatives and friends of a dying person insist on remaining at their deathbed. Although they don't mean to be disruptive, they can make it difficult for a dying Buddhist to recite mantras or receive teachings. How should I deal with this kind of person? Rinpoche responds, always be skillful and never try to impose anything on anyone. The moment of death is a crucial point in everyone's life. If just one of the relatives or friends is willing to listen to you, try telling them about the bardos. But if no one will listen, sit somewhere private and read the instructions in this book and say some prayers. Or read Great Liberation through hearing in the bardo, or the bardo instructions you like best. Nothing and no one can stop you from doing that. Practically speaking, during the process of dying, Tibetan tradition recommends that we avoid moving or touching a person's body, especially from the waist down. So if possible, try to encourage relatives and friends to gather by the dying person's head, not their feet. Over to you, Judy.
Okay, so it really depends a lot on the setting and where the person is dying. So if it's in a hospital, I will often go and talk to the nurses beforehand, and ask them how long it is before they will need the bed, because not all hospitals are grabbing beds. If it's a big public hospital, that's one thing, but I've also been in other facilities where people are dying, and I've gone and talked to the nurses before the person has died and asked how long we can need. And they often look quite astonished, and I'll explain that it's the person's religious and spiritual tradition to have some time after they've stopped breathing. And if it's at home, I try to talk to the family beforehand, explain that dying is a process, and that when the person stops breathing, that this is really the most precious time, and to remind them that this will be the last time they get to spend with that person. So I really try to encourage people to just quieten down, to stop, to just be with their loved one. It doesn't always happen. I've noticed that, there's sometimes an energy is released when somebody stops breathing, and people get very busy. So you can only do your best. Mostly we've been fairly successful in what I call buying some time. If you're in a hospital and there's no one around, you don't have to go and tell anyone. Once the person has stopped breathing, there's nothing you need to do really, except to sit quietly and to just appreciate that time and that wonderful opportunity where the veils have parted and we're really in the presence of the great mystery. And to encourage people to do nothing at that stage.
Yeah, thank you. We've heard that from a number of guest speakers over the time, and I think it's so important that families and people really know that, because often the first thing is to go and get someone to need to do something, to even check are they really dead. So I think it's really important that people keep hearing that again and again, that there's nothing to do, just sit back. I think Zenith's saying was put the kettle on and sit down. So everyone's had their own expression, but it's all involved taking a breath, stopping and being with what's happening. Yeah, thank you for reinforcing that. What are the physical signs of the end of the inner dissolution? Are they similar to the signs that doctors see after death, like the onset of rigor mortis? How can I tell when a person's consciousness has left their body? And Rinpoche replies, the signs doctors see may well be the same as the signs that signal the end of the inner dissolution, but the process of dying isn't uniform. And if there are predictable signs, they will vary from person to person. A great practitioner who is sensitive to the process of dying and so on will be able to tell when the consciousness leaves the body. But for the rest of us, it's almost impossible to be sure. In most cases, we must rely on the general instructions. You will know that a person is close to being completely dead once they stop breathing, their bodies are cold, and they don't respond in any way. So again, Judy, did you want to speak to this? And maybe, I think Ani Lhagsam as well.
Oh,
No. Ani Lhagsam?
So a little bit like Judy was saying, but in my experience, different family members often have different ideas about what's going to happen or what should happen. One family that there was only 2 weeks between diagnosis and death, one of the family members thought when the person stopped breathing, we should call the police. So obviously not everyone had kind of got all the same information in that situation. But people have different ideas from their past experience about when funeral directors need to be called, you know, if the person's in their home and things like that, when they should be moved, should we all be quiet and whisper now, all sorts of different things like that. But I usually suggest to people that there is no rush, there's no timeline, and ideally it moves at the pace of the slowest person. So everyone has time to spend with the person who's died, to say their goodbyes, whatever else they might want to say, without any rush. Mm. So most people are happy to go with that when, you know, after it's explained to them that it's not important to hurry. They don't have to run off and tell everyone in the next 10 minutes or put it on Facebook or whatever else. And so usually then people settle down and it's much more peaceful in the house.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. After death, if there is warmth around the heart of the corpse that lasts for up to a day, is it always a sign that the dead person has entered the tukdam state, even when it happens to the corpse of someone who isn't a practitioner? Or could there be another explanation for this warmth? Tukdam means that a spiritual practitioner is dwelling in the state of samadhi or one-pointedness. So any warmth around the heart of someone who is not a practitioner is unlikely to be a sign of samadhi. They may just be distracted. And the next question, should a picture of the Buddha or Guru be left by a corpse, and should the chanting continue after death, and for how long? Rinpoche replies, yes, of course, but the picture doesn't necessarily have to be left in the room where the person died. These days that can be difficult if the person died in hospital. Instead, you could put the picture in their bedroom at home and leave it there for as long as possible. Ani Lhagsam, I think this was one of yours.
So, yes, many of the people I see are not necessarily Buddhist. They have asked to see a Buddhist nun, or else, you know, that's the only way that I go to visit people, if they've specifically asked to see a monk or a nun. And many of them have no specific religion. So I generally suggest that they have a picture that represents peace and calm for them. So that can be, you know, it might be a picture of the ocean or a forest. It might be a particular garden, flowers they like. Mm. Family members, often that increases attachment to the family members. But one man, he'd driven racing cars, and he had a huge image of a racing car, and it reminded him of the times when he was fit and strong and racing cars at Bathurst, and the friends he had in that sport and things like that. So he found looking at that was a wonderful, calm experience. So it can be very specific. If the person doesn't have a particular religion that they've got faith in to help them at this time.
Thank you. I have been told that our state of mind at the moment of death is vital and we should try to be as calm as possible. My father died in pain and appeared to be very distressed. I am now worried about what happened to him. And Rinpoche responds, there are many practices you can do to help a loved one who appeared to die in distress. For example, a Changchuk ritual, purification of the dead. The dead person's family could, if they wish, commemorate the life of their loved one in all kinds of ways. Some people do voluntary work for a charity, or give money to charities, or give food and clothing to the poor, or offer shelter to the homeless, or even donate money to campaigns for saving the earth or cleaning up the environment, then dedicate it all to the memory of their loved one. These are the kinds of good deeds or virtuous actions that will really help. It's important to remember that in Buddhism, virtue is always measured by how much closer an activity will bring you to understanding the truth. Alternatively, or in addition, if this kind of commemoration appeals to you, commission a Buddha statue. If you can't afford to have a statue made, you could simply download a beautiful photograph of a Buddha statue, print it and hang it in your home. Or you could print several copies of the photo and give them away. Or you could read some of the Buddha's teachings, the sutras. Or you could publish and distribute free copies of the sutras you like best. Or make offerings to the lay and ordained sanghas, for example, contributing towards the upkeep of a monastery. If you prefer, you could follow one of the many traditional methods for accumulating merit for the dead. You could make light, incense and flower offerings at Bodh Gaya or Mount Wu Tai San, or whichever holy place you like best. Or you could offer 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks of your time to tidying up all the rubbish scattered in and around holy shrines and temples. You could facilitate the study and practice of the Dharma through sponsorship, so that Dharma students can dedicate themselves to their spiritual path full time. These are just examples of the kinds of good deeds you can do. There are many other options. On top of everything I have just mentioned, if you're a tantrika, there are countless rituals that could help your loved one. You could, for example, do the Changchuk ritual purification that I have already mentioned, through which the consciousness of the dead person is guided to a better rebirth. Chogyal Rinpoche's Ko Dumdruk is very easy to do. Changchuk can be done no matter how many thousands of years ago the person died. We'll quickly hear from our wonderful team. No?
Oh, sorry. Was it? I thought you had. Were you just saying any of us could talk at this time?
I'm just looking to see if I've...
Because I had written something about that. I'd obviously said I'd say something at that time.
Yes, I've got to remind about what you're wishing for them.
Oh,
no.
So is that I was? So should I say that now? What happened?
Yes, I think that would be good.
So when my first lay teacher, she ran a Dharma centre quite close to where I lived when I first came to this tradition of Buddhism, and when she was dying, her guru, her main teacher, had advised us of many different practices to be at different times during the process. When she lost consciousness, when she stopped breathing, all these different, when the consciousness left the body, and for the 49 days after that. And so we were to dedicate these to her future rebirth, and for her to have all those conducive circumstances to meet the Dharma and make those future lives meaningful and help with her progress on the spiritual path. And so after the 49 days, I was kind of in the habit of, doing something for her in my daily practice. So I asked my teacher, and he said I could dedicate all my daily practices to her future rebirths in that way for the rest of my life, and that would be beneficial. So if people feel that that's something, that was the advice I got, and I gave that advice to someone else, and they were very happy to do that for their loved one. So for some people that might be helpful. I've only given that advice once. on request. I didn't just go and say it.
Yeah. No, but it's good to hear because it just opens the options up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'm going to speed ahead a little bit because we've still got, this is such a big section of the book, but we are definitely going to do it. So the What is Chungchuk will be covered next week by Sarah Wilkinson. She's joining the session next week. She leads our Kawa Dundruk practice monthly online, so you'll hear more about that then. The question after that. My grandmother was smiling when she died and looked very peaceful. My family has always believed this means she had a good death, but my grandfather's death was quite different and very distressing for the whole family. It didn't look anything like a good death. Rinpoche, how would you describe a good death? For the dead person's lips to be twisted into a grin is definitely not a necessary characteristic of a good death. A good death is to die listening to the recitation of the names of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. A good death is to have someone with you to remind you to think about the well-being of all sentient beings and for you to make the wish that all sentient beings are happy and don't suffer. A good death is having someone with you to remind you not to be greedy or to hold on to any part of this life or to be angry and so on. A good death, according to Buddhism, is to die in the atmosphere of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And an extremely good death is to be introduced to the nature of mind, the Buddha, by a qualified practitioner at the moment you die. But don't be too quick to judge whether one death is good, another is bad. After all, what a person's death looks like to you will be based on your own perceptions and therefore coloured by your experiences, education and prejudice. Next question. Does emergency treatment like CPR or electric shock treatment to restart the heart cause a dying person unnecessary suffering? There is no way of knowing. In the case of critical medical emergencies, it is probably best to rely on a doctor's advice. Each one of us is extremely attached to life. Our will to live is usually so strong that if there is the slightest chance that our lives could be prolonged, most of us wouldn't hesitate to undergo invasive emergency treatments like CPR. But it's very difficult to judge what is genuinely good and helpful for someone else. Having said that, as Dharma practitioners value practice above all else, a seasoned Dharma practitioner would probably consider it worth enduring the discomfort and suffering of invasive procedures, if doing so would buy them a little more time to practice. If such a procedure could give a practitioner the extra few moments they need to look at the picture of the Buddha or their Guru or to hear the sound of Dharma, most would gladly endure it. My husband is dying and says that in a crisis situation, he doesn't want to be given any form of emergency treatment to prolong his life. Should I respect his wishes? And Rinpoche replies, if the sick or dying person is conscious and in their right mind, meaning if they are sane, rational, thinking clearly, and not suffering from any form of mental illness, yes, you should respect their wishes. The doctors say that invasive measures might make my husband more comfortable, but he is adamant he doesn't want to go through that kind of ordeal. Should I intervene if the doctors try to insist? If the dying person is of sound mind and not intent on ending their life, their wishes should be respected, but bear in mind that there is a fine line between wanting an assisted death, which isn't an option for Buddhists, and not wanting to be kept alive by artificial methods, which should be respected. In some cases, a practitioner may refuse a treatment because it would interfere with their spiritual practice. So we should be particularly respectful of a practitioner's wishes. How important is it to find an appropriate balance between giving a dying person drugs like morphine to make sure they aren't in too much pain and maintaining clarity of mind so they can be as aware as possible at the time of death? It depends. From a spiritual point of view, if the dying person is not a practitioner and has strong negative habits, whether they take morphine or not, they have about as much chance of liberation at the moment of death as an animal. If at all possible, it is best not to give a person who is very close to death drugs that will either make them groggy or knock them out. Ideally, practitioners prefer not to be befuddled by drugs and to know what is happening as they die. By remaining conscious and aware, they will be able to hear their friends chant the names of the Buddha or recite the instructions for the moment of death. They may even be able to look at a picture of the Buddha or their guru. How important is prayer? When someone close to death becomes so afraid that they panic, hospital doctors usually sedate them. They don't have much choice. If you're religious and are taking care of a sedated, dying person, simply remain at their bedside and say prayers for them. Prayer always helps enormously, no matter which tradition you follow. Often there is nothing else you can do. The English often say, it is the thought that counts, and it's so true. The prayer is a great deal more powerful and effective than a fleeting thought, so prayers from any tradition will be very beneficial. If the dying person is Jewish, Christian, Hindu, atheist, etc., and you are Buddhist, there is no reason why you shouldn't say Buddhist prayers for them. If the dying person is open to discussing their beliefs with you, ask them directly if they would like you to say a prayer for them in their own tradition. So we'll quickly talk to this, and then we will move on to our last section. So we have our prayer lists, which is something that people can put names on with Siddhartha's intent for people that are experiencing obstacles or who have died. And over time I've seen how important this is for people. So before we do the sock practice, we read the list of names. And my experience is that people putting those names on there or asking for names to go on there feel very relieved that they're sharing the responsibility and they don't feel like they're holding it all themselves. So that's reassuring for everyone. I don't know who wants to speak next, but I'm sure each of you has something to say about prayer.
I found that it's very comforting to families, especially, even if they wouldn't relate to any religious or spiritual belief. When I say, would you like some prayers and some butter lamps lit to honour your loved one, the amount of comfort it brings them is really amazing. I'm often a little bit hesitant about offering this, and without doubt, every time I've done it, people have been so grateful and so thankful. So I think sharing that is really important, and not to, if you're a bit like me, to be a bit hesitant about offering things like that. So I just say this is what is happening, and butter lamps have been lit in India and lots of people are praying for them. The look on their faces is just so wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Ani Lhagsam?
I often see people who might have different religions that they haven't practiced for a long time, or they're not sure if they still have any faith in that particular tradition or any tradition. It is Australia, but they have asked to see a Buddhist monk or nun. So I feel quite confident in asking them their particular prayers or things that they might want. And if they actually can't come up with any, and I do offer to put their names on prayer lists and things like that, Often families are unwilling to ask because it's not something we talk about so much in some families. But sometimes people say they would like particular music, particular chants. Sometimes they'll listen online and pick one or two, and then some family member can, with the technological experience, can put it onto a device that just plays in the background. And this can bring a lot of calm to the room where the person's dying, whether it's a hospital room or at home, because it's just in the background, it's just very quiet. It's something the person's chosen in some way as something that represents peace and calmness to them. And it also helps with people just sitting with the person. They don't feel that they have to as much fill the silence with chatter, because they can just sit and listen. It seems to bring a level of calm to the family members as well as the person who's dying. So sometimes that's quite a useful thing for people.
Yeah.
It feels like something they can do in putting together the recording, and then something that they can also enjoy while they're sitting.
Yeah, thank you. Kirsten, do you want to add something?
I really just wanted to say that from my own personal experience, contacting monasteries and teachers to do prayers for the deceased loved one is such a comfort, because it's such a busy time as well. When that happens, that you just know that there are people who will be praying for that person. And it's just amazing how compassionate people are doing the prayers for people that they don't know. So it's brought a lot of comfort to me and my family as well.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move to a different section of the book that we want to do this evening, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'm just going to go down to, sorry. It's too fast for my eyes to see. I promise we're getting there. We're going to being with extreme pain. Here we go. Okay. Advice for those suffering unbearable pain. What can you do if you suffer from unremitting, incurable chronic pain, but your doctors tell you that you could live for months or even years? Rinpoche says, try to accumulate as much merit as possible. Pray that the pain you are suffering and the pain of dying will not be prolonged. You could even pray to die as soon as possible and offer the months and years you have left in this life to the great bodhisattvas so they have more time to help sentient beings. Make strong aspirations to be reborn quickly in a better rebirth, where you can also continue helping and enlightening countless sentient beings. Buddhas and bodhisattvas, let me die right now. May the months and years that remain of this life be added to the lives of great bodhisattvas who can truly help all sentient beings. Make this prayer joyfully, wholeheartedly, and with the right motivation. By praying in this way, you will continue to accumulate merit during your final days and hours. Motivated by the wish to start afresh and with renewed energy, arouse the strong determination to be reborn as someone who can genuinely help others. Pray that what is left of your present life force goes into your next rebirth. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, let me die right now. May the months and years that remain of this life be added to my next life. May I instantly be reborn with the energy, determination, and ability to help sentient beings, selflessly and lovingly. May I then continue to work to bring all sentient beings to the perfect happiness of enlightenment. If you have received the appropriate empowerment, you could also do an Amitai's long life puja or sponsor someone else to do it for you. So Kirsten?
Yes, I just wanted to talk about pain and also the relation to emotions and mental anguish as well. I find that sometimes when a person is in a lot of pain, physical pain, sometimes that can really point towards emotional pain as well, and maybe mental anguish. So depending on what's happening for that person, it could be because of sadness, it could be the loss of life that they're experiencing, the loss of independence. It could be family disputes as well, or worried about family members. So there's all sorts of things that can play into experiencing physical pain. And as we all know, sometimes we get a headache, a tension headache, or an upset stomach, or neck pain, things like that. And it's good to keep an eye out for that and just see what else we can do other than giving pain relief. What else might cause the pain? And then we can either get a psychologist in, or a social worker, or someone like Ani Lhagsam who can give some spiritual support, just to have more of a holistic approach to pain. It's not just physical, although I think it's important also not to downplay anyone's pain and just say, oh, well, you're just stressed, or you're just having some emotional issues. I think that would be the wrong thing to do. You have to meet the person where they are at and where their pain level is at as well, and take it seriously and be responsive to that, and understanding of that as well. But yes, I think it's always good to look at pain from a more holistic point of view as well.
Okay, thank you.
So there are many components to pain, and also how we interpret pain, our own pain, but also when we look at other people. There's cultural and social components to pain. In some cultures, they're very vocal about pain, talk about pain, cry loudly and things like that. And that's part of the culture. So if you're not doing those things, it's assumed you're not in pain. And we sometimes interpret these things differently if we're not from that particular culture. And sometimes there are personal or family expectations. And just recently, if we look at just recently, all the family of the Queen, very stoic, very British, very stiff upper lip in terms of their grief, and which is also a component of when we're caring for someone, we get this anticipatory grief, and so that can affect our care. And so we feel pain differently, not just the person who's dying, but the family around them. So there are some specific meditations about managing pain that can help. Ideally, we start practicing early on, maybe before we're even terminally ill, about how to manage pain using meditation, not just immediately looking at Panadol or Nurofen or something like that. And if we become familiar with the practice of managing small pain, then we can gradually use that in terms of managing greater pain, and it reduces the amount of heavy medication we might need later on, and and the side effects of that. And when I was looking after my teacher when she was dying, the Karuna nurses asked me if I thought she was in denial because she'd been an acupuncturist and meditating for a long time. And she used her meditation brilliantly and had very little pain relief, to the extent that the nurses thought that she was somehow denying herself the medication that was there for her to have. So she was a bit cleverer than I would be with it, though, I think. So I think Ani Zangmo, are we going to be able to put up the link to the meditation easing pain from Karuna?
Yeah, I think Ben's going to put that up. So yes, there'll be a link in the chat box so you can have a look at the pain meditation. It's from the Karuna website. It's a wealth of information in there if you want to have a look. And also we'll put it in our resource section from tonight's session. So that brings us to the end of all the many questions and answers for this week. But please, if there's any questions, we've gone slightly over, but we'll still take a couple of questions if you want to put them in the chat box. More than happy to, while we've got these wonderful guest speakers here, please ask away. I'm looking. I can't see if anyone's got their hand up because I'm on here with the other speakers. But if anyone would like to ask a question, you can unmute if you want to.
I just wanted to say how blessed we are to have, it's Sering here, to have these amazing guest speakers that we have on Living is Dying, and the wealth of experience of Ani Lhagsam and Judy and Kirsten is just so incredible that we have access to this. And I wanted to give a special thank you to Judy for appearing on Living is Dying. For those of you who don't know Judy, she was involved in the horrendous floods in Lismore, and with her partner Graham rescued in fast-moving waters from the roof of her house on a jet ski, and has had an incredible traumatic time. And they've only just recently, Graham, assisted by family and friends, have rebuilt their beautiful home, and they've just recently moved back in, and Judy's had a lot on her plate, and just really want to give a very special thank you to Judy for appearing tonight and sharing her more than 30 years of experience as a pioneer in the field of death and dying.
Thank you, Sering. You're very kind.
Kamala, did you have your hand up? Kamala,
Hand up.
please.
I was just wondering about the music of people that put together a playlist for the dying person. What if they ask for rock and roll because, you know, they're whatever? Do you go along with that, or do you direct them to Spotify for some peaceful sort of music?
Well, it's really, people have different things that bring them what they consider a calm and peaceful time, a happy time in their lives. I was arranging a funeral once for someone who said, you know, what music did their mother like? And I asked, and she said, oh, I guess Johnny Cash is out of the question. And I said, you can do whatever you like. Anyway, the rest of the family wouldn't have liked that. And a few months later, I did a funeral service for a couple who'd spent a lot of time square dancing and doing competition, that it was Johnny Cash, Johnny Cash, Johnny Cash. So,
thank you.
well, you know, if it's something that is going to bring calm and peace and even a little bit of distraction, if someone's a spiritual practitioner, of course the music but many people in Australia have no spiritual practice, and don't have any particular interest. So this is just something quietly playing in the background, not something that's spreading through an entire ward.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good answer.
Just having a quick look in the questions. Thank yous. Could I ask a question about life release? We're going to be doing a life release practice towards the end of the program, but if you want to talk about it before then, you can email me directly, or yeah, we will be doing it together. So Nancy, I'll just put my details here. Excellent. We'll also be doing Rua Sangsho together. Excellent. I'm just going to message someone else quickly. I'm just going to say my email. That would be easier because I'm very slow typing. It's zangmo66@gmail.com for the person who wanted my contact. And what else? I think we're almost there. Thank you so much. Another new message. Okay, great. So weird being here reading all this. Okay, we will be doing the Kowa Dundruk, going over the Kowa Dundruk practice next week. So the person asking about the difference between Changchuk and how it is part of the Kowa Dundruk, that will all be apparent. So next week we will be looking at what to do after death, including handling the corpse and the Changchuk practice connected with Kowa Dundruk. Sering will be facilitating the session and be joined by Annie Whitlock, Julie St Auburn and Sarah Wilkinson, who hosts our Siddhartha's Intent Kowa Dundruk practice. There's a couple more messages and then we will dedicate together. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All thank yous, and thank you very much to all of you. Let's dedicate. If Annie Shempen, can you put the prayer up, please? Thank you so much to our wonderful panel of people. This virtuous accumulation of merit we offer so that all obstacles dissolve, and at the time of our death each of us may find ease in dying and swift rebirth in the pure land of great bliss, quickly gaining enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. If the material presented today has raised any concerns for you, it is suggested you speak with a trusted friend, your personal health professional, or your Buddhist teacher or instructor. Thanks, Shempen. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful panel.
Thank you, everyone.
Zangmo. Thank you.
Thank you,
Judy.
everybody.
Thank you, Ani.
Thank you.
Thank you.